sheet of paper and a pen. So is everyone ready for me to start reading? Okay.
I am ready.
I will take that as a yes. All right, then give me 1 sec. All right, my time begin now. My partner and I resolve that the United States federal government should impose price controls on the pharmaceutical industry. We define price controls as any limitations set on pharmaceuticals, meaning price ceilings or floors. We define R&D as research and development related projects. Contention one is innovation. If price controls are imposed on the pharmaceutical industry, loss in profit will lead to loss in innovation. Innovative drugs are crucial to Americans today because they provide cures for many diseases that humans still face. The Swiss nonprofit International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations explains in 2017 that by investing money into R&D, medical science will improve and thus contribute to better overall welfare. Take hypertension, for example, or extremely high blood pressure. It affects 75 million Americans, or roughly 1 in 3 adults, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. But the IFMPA projects that for every $1 spent on new medicines for hypertension in the United States, over $10 in medical spending is saved. For hypertension alone, innovative drugs could save hundreds in medical spending per person and help treat millions of adults with life-threatening chronic conditions. But by opposing price controls, we would see huge decreases in innovative drugs. R&D are risky investments, and lower revenues are going to make companies unwilling to make new drugs. According to the IFPMA 2017, 99.2% of all innovative drugs do not get passed. The cost of making a new drug is $2.7 billion, according to a 2016 study from the Tufts Center. This much of the cost and uncertainty is made unworthy since revenues will decrease by 24% when price controls are implemented, according to the National Center for Biotechnology Information. Statistics from the Forum of Health and Economic Policy 2017 analysis states that pricing policies will reduce the number of new drug introductions by as much as 25%. This trend is seen again in other sources. According to Precision Health Economics, the introduction of price controls will likely decrease the number of new drugs by 8 to 13% annually. 8 to 13 annually. This means that by 2030 we'll lose nearly 156 life-saving drugs or improving drugs as a nation. And according to Joanna Shepard from the Emory School of Law, each new drug brought to the market saves over 11,000 lives every year. By reducing the innovation of new drugs, we risk thousands of lives each year per drug. In 2030, over 1 million Americans would have lost treatment and lives because of price controls. If we impose price controls on the pharmaceutical industry, all Americans will pay the price as the production of innovative drugs will decrease. Contention 2 is jobs. Price controls will leave many people unemployed. The Catalyst 2017 cites that the U.S. pharmaceutical industry supports 4.5 million jobs. 4.5 million jobs that will be in immediate danger if price controls are imposed. These jobs are endangered because, according to a study by the IFPMA in 2017, direct price controls would reduce revenue spent on employee wages by 74%. And Frank Lichtenberg of the National Bureau of Economic Research explains that in the long run, a 10% decline in drug prices would cause industry employment to decline by a minimum of 4%. Even a bare minimum of 4% would be 157,000 to 180,000 jobs lost. All of these people would lose stability and income to support their families. According to 2017 statistics from the World Trade Organization and the IFPMA, the pharmaceutical industry influences more than just pharmaceutical jobs. Their 2017 Global Health Report explains that in the United States, every job in the industry supported 5.21 jobs outside the pharmaceutical sector in areas from manufacturing and construction to childcare, retail, accounting, and more. Imposing price controls in the U.S. would be detrimental for the industry and the country as a whole because it affects more than just pharmaceutical jobs alone. My partner and I implore you to see this case reasonably and recognize the dangerous impacts of price controls in the U.S. pharmaceutical industry. Thank you. All right. So
excuse me?
Yeah, what's up?
Did you see my messages in the chat?
Yeah, I did. So I understand if whoever came late, you didn't like get to flow the first half, but hopefully, I don't know, maybe you flowed the second contention. But if you flowed anything at all, please post a picture of it in the chat so we can kind of give
Yeah, I'm
feedback.
on mobile right now. My computer's really weird.
Sometimes that does happen. Yeah, and Daniel, if you could also do that as well.
Yeah, I'm on it.
Oh, let's look at Bomberger's flow. Okay, I'm trying to.
Yeah, it's a little unclear. I just like the pen kind of sucks, so I can't like write well.
Well, at least it's legible this time.
True. I tried to use as little like shorthand as possible, but I missed a bunch of the authors because I normally just don't flow authors.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's look at this from Daniel. All right, so we have contention 1, innovation, something diseases.
It's just K2. It's just like it's necessary to key to curing diseases.
Oh, it's key to see. Look at that. Look at this shorthand. Now y'all know another one.
Mhm.
Um,
I mean,
and-
there was like a lot of nothing being said, so I didn't know what to flow.
yeah, that's true. This is not my case. It was like an old novice case, so those obviously weren't really good. But yeah,
And
see,
it was like,
Daniel got all the key ones, and then contention 2. Yes, exactly. So you just want to get like the key ideas and the links. Daniel did a good job of here. I guess no one else tried to flow, so let's just move on with what we're gonna be doing today, which is weighing contentions. That's actually like about the topic that we are talking about. And okay, short pop quiz. Does anyone remember what are the 3 main types that you can weigh? Like 3 main, yeah.
Impact, link, D-link, and
Wait, no, that's those are like the ways that you can refute someone's case, right? So like rebuttals and weighing is different, right? Weighing is comparing my arguments against yours and we're taking them at face. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying if you are right and I am right, why is my argument more important than yours? Whereas like, D-Link and Turn, those are like rebuttals saying, oh, this is why my opponents are wrong. But we're talking about weighing. And does anyone remember the 3 main categories of weighing? All right, maybe Daniel can give us one of them. Daniel.
Isn't there like an impact?
oh wait, did you ask me
impact
something? My
weighing?
sister was talking to me.
Oh no, it's okay. Ethan, what did you say?
Isn't there like an impact weighing?
Yes, but weighing is all about the impacts, right? Like it yeah, weighing is mostly on the impact level. So, but like what are the kinds of weighing? Okay, here, let's jog your memory. One of the kinds of weighing is magnitude weighing. Is this ringing a bell? Does nobody remember?
Probability?
Yes, probability, and there's one more. The last one is time from weighing, right? So, does anyone remember what magnitude weighing is?
It's like how big the impact is.
Yes. And then how about what is probability weighing?
Like what's the probability that it will happen?
Mm-hmm. And then what about time frame?
Which one will happen sooner?
Yeah, it can be either which one happens sooner or which one happens later. Okay, does anyone remember there's 3 types of magnitude weighing? Does anyone remember what those were? Damn, y'all, this is sad. I think we reviewed this like 4 times.
We reviewed it like last week as well.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I guess we're struggling. It's okay. So the first type under magnitude is just magnitude weighing itself, which is just, is my number bigger or is your number bigger, right? Like if we have the same impact, I have 100 million, you only have 1. Obviously, 100 million is bigger than 1 million. All right, and then the second type of impact weighing is severity, right? And that's like, oh, your impact is people falling into poverty, but my impact is people dying. So like probably dying is worse than falling into poverty. So the severity of my argument outweighs yours. And then the third type of magnitude weighing is scope. So it's like you have different impacts, but how many people do you actually affect, right? So it's like maybe they have poverty and you have deaths, but yours is like, oh, I impact like 100 million people across the world, whereas you only impact, 10 million people. And it can also be kind of like a geographic, right? Let's say in terms of magnitude, you can have the same number, right? Let's say you both have 100 million people, but yours is 100 million people across the world, and theirs is 100 million people in the U.S. You would still be kind of winning on scope because, yours is affecting like people across the globe, not just people in the United States. All right. And then for probability weighing, does anyone remember? Okay.
I remember one of them at least.
Okay, let's hear it, Daniel.
Strength of link.
Yeah, exactly. So strength of link is one of them, as Daniel said, and that one's kind of like uh the debate probability, right? It's like obviously when you're debating, you're like, oh, my opponents are wrong for like all these reasons, or like their link chain is like super sketchy, right? Like they're like, oh, if we pass free healthcare for everyone, then Trump will get mad, and if Trump gets mad, he'll start another war, and then this war will suddenly like kill everyone on Earth. So obviously, like the strength of the link is like pretty weak, right? Um, you can point that out, like they have a lot of links, and you can also be like, yeah, while we were debating, I had like 10 responses against my opponents, but they only had like 2 responses. Or they only responded to 2 of them, right? So you still have like 8 responses against their case. It's pretty evident that you're probably doing better than they are in terms of strength of link. And then the next type of probability weighing is just like inherent probability in the real world, right? So this is like for example, your opponents might talk about a great power war between the United States, Russia, and China. And then you might be talking about, if the economy gets better, millions of people get out of poverty. Now, like the inherent probability of people being lifted out of poverty because the economy gets better is pretty high, right? Like we see when the economy gets better, more people get more money, so people get out of poverty. That makes a lot of sense. But as for a great power war, we haven't had one. Like we've only had 2 great power wars. So like We haven't had one in like 100 years. So what's the chance? Okay, maybe not 100 years, in like
In like
80
a
years.
long while, and it
Yeah,
doesn't
in a
look like
long
there's
time, right? And
any like
like
right around the corner.
yeah. So we haven't had it for a very long time. So it's like, when is it really gonna happen next? And do we really want to go to war with each other, right? So the probability of that actually happening is pretty low. And then the last kind of weighing for probability is kind of clarity of link, which kind of ties into the strength of link. Like, it's all like under the debate probability, right? It's basically um you know you so we talked about like extensions in summary, right? And how you have to extend the whole link chain, and then also your impact. So you have to explain why price controls would lead to people dying. You can't just be like, oh yeah, price controls mean people die, so you should vote against my opponents, right? You have to extend like price controls decrease revenue for companies, which cuts away from R&D budgets. And these drugs from the R&D could have saved millions of lives, which is why people die if we were to implement price controls, right? And the way they extend it is clarity of link, right? If they don't extend it in summary very well, like if they miss one of their links or they didn't fully extend the link chain, obviously on clarity of link there, they're kind of losing because they didn't do a good extension either in summary or final focus. If one of those are bad, the whole thing kind of goes bad. And then the next like big type of weighing category of weighing is time frame, right? And so Ethan, you mentioned that one of them was like which impact happens first, right? Which is absolutely right. That's one of the ways that you can do it. Like, oh, my impact happens in 1 year and your impact happens in 2 years, right? But the problem with time frame weighing is that a lot of people just say it and they don't explain why it's important, right? Like, why does it matter if yours happens 1 year before theirs? What's the significance, right? Like, we know for magnitude, like obviously more people dying is worse. For probability, if yours is more likely to happen, we probably should vote for you because yours is probably the more likely argument that's going to win and that's going to happen. But on time frame, just because yours happens first, it does not make a difference unless you explain what the difference is, right? And that's where things like, okay, so the first thing would be a prerequisite, right? It's like mine's. And of course, this prerequisite can be talked about like in both ways in terms of like, oh, my impact happens after yours, so my impact comes first or prereqs yours, or mine happens before yours, so it prereqs yours. Usually it's used in the latter, right, where you say mine happens first, so it prereqs yours. So for example, if you have an economic recession and they have uh like solving terrorism, right? You might say that my impact is a prerequisite to yours because, you know, if like my recession happens this year and you like solve terrorism in the next 10 years, well, if a recession happens, there's probably going to be more terrorists because, when people fall into poverty, maybe they turn to more extreme methods like becoming a terrorist. And because of that, uh, you have to solve for my recession first before you can solve for your terrorist impact, right? Or, you might say, oh, you're solving climate change. Okay, but if a recession happens, people are going to run out of money to actually try and focus on solving climate change. So that's why you got to prereq my argument. And as we said, that's how it usually goes. Mine's happened before yours, so mine's more important. But you can also do it the other way around, right? Even if mine's happens after yours, it can still prereq yours. Like, if you're saying that you can lift people out of poverty, like 100 million people out of poverty in America, and my impact is like 10 years down the road, we're gonna have a huge global like financial crash. Well, mine's just gonna prereq yours because sure, you might lift people out of poverty in the short term, but unless you're going to solve for this global financial crisis, more people than just your 100 million people would be falling back into poverty. And then the next way of time frame weighing is reversibility, right? And that's like my impact is irreversible, but yours is reversible, right? So in terms of, poverty versus death, which one is worse? This is one way that you can say is worse, right? It's not only it's not only that death is more severe, but it's also irreversible, right? If people die, you can't lift them out of the grave. But if people fall into poverty, you can probably like give them welfare or make the economy better, give them a job, and they could probably get out of poverty. The third way is short-term versus long-term weighing, right? So that is like, yours happens, in 1 year, and mine's happens across like 10 years, right? So, in the long term, a problem like climate change might be more important, but in the short term, if there's a recession, that's probably also pretty bad. So you can weigh both ways, right? In the short term, you should prioritize mine because, in 100 years, we'll still have time to solve climate change, whereas we only have 1 year left to solve for this recession. But you can also go the long way, like, they're only solving a temporary problem, but in the long run, more people are going to die because of climate change if we don't solve it. So that's why it's more important for you to look at the long-term impacts as opposed to the short-term impacts. And then another reason why, you can weigh against like long-term impacts. So let's say yours happens in 1 year, whereas theirs happened in 100 years, is this argument about intervening actors. And we haven't really talked about it before, but it's like kind of intuitive, right? If you have 100 years to solve the problem of climate change, like you have a lot of time. You don't know what's going to happen between then, like now and then, right? So what's to say that this argument that you're having right now is really key to climate change, right? There might be other solutions for climate change that we will figure out in 50 years or in 100 years, since we have that time. But what we don't have time for is like, right now, like solving for this war or this recession that's going to come up. And since y'all don't remember, I just want to point y'all to, let me share my screen. If you go under the resources channel, right? Okay, and then you go under files, go to big picture ideas, and then you'll see weighing mechanisms. And if you click in, right, this kind of gives you a list of, so we have the three main categories of weighing, right? Probability, magnitude, and time frame. And then we have the different types of weighing under those categories of weighing, right? A function of debating, a function of the impact, and then kind of a short explanation. So if you ever forget, feel free to come back to this Word document and go ahead and answer that. Okay, so does anyone have any questions on these mechanisms? Because we are going to do a drill with these, so if you don't know how to weigh, that's a pretty big problem.
Okay, well, it's good that everyone's got it then.
All right, since no one has questions, we are going to do the drill. So let's see, how many people are in here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Is there anyone that y'all like specifically want to go against, like, or do you not have a preference? Okay, how about since we are gonna do contentions from this resolution, so it's all gonna be about the United States federal government should impose price controls on the pharmaceutical industry. Is there a side that y'all would prefer? Like, you'd rather have a contention on the AF, or you would rather have a contention on the neg? No? Okay. Well, then I'm just gonna assign sides. So Daniel and John Gunn, Daniel Faith and John Gunn, y'all will be neg, and then Ethan and William will be AF. So I'm gonna send you.
Could you please repeat what we're debating over?
Yeah, the resolution is the United States federal government should impose price controls on the pharmaceutical industry, right? So it's a topic that we've been talking about for a long time. And we're just gonna do a weighing drill. So I'm gonna give y'all the contentions that you're gonna be working with. And then y'all are gonna weigh them against each other. So no nothing like rebuttal but it's more
Yeah, the topic doesn't really matter that much. What mostly matters is that you're comparing the effects of each contention. So, i.e., like deaths versus poverty, or whatever it is. You're not actually trying to be like, oh no, their contention won't happen.
Yeah. Okay. Give me 1 second to. Oh my god. These cases are horrendous. Okay. Okay. I am going to actually. Can I PM people here? Let me try. Liam. What's your last name? Yoon? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. So you should check your private messages. I just sent you a contention that you will read. And let me get one for Ethan. These cases are horrible. Oh my god. Oh, this one. William, did you get the message I sent you?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. And then Ethan Lee. L-E. Okay, Ethan, I'm also sending you a contention, so please let me know when you get it. What the heck? Okay, sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, Ethan, I just sent you one, and then John Gunn. Let's see, all right, John Gunn, I sent you one, and then Daniel Faith. Where's the... Oh my god. Okay. Yes, and then this one. Okay, so y'all should all have received in your DMs a contention. Did everyone get it yet? Can I get a yes or a no? If you check your team's DMs.
I got it, but I like suck at the contention you wrote me, like about monopolies and stuff.
Okay. Well, if anyone's confused, so everyone just take like 2 minutes to read over your contention, and if y'all have any questions about them, feel free to ask. All right. Then hopefully everyone is finished reading their contentions. The first pair we're going to have up is William versus Daniel.
I'm kind of confused on like what we're doing.
Could I go second?
Okay, so wait, let me just answer some questions. So Ethan asked
Goddamn.
what are mergers? It's basically when one company buys another company. Okay. So if I'm like a super rich company, I probably have billions of dollars and I could probably just buy your company and then we become one big company. That's what a merger is. And okay, as for what we're gonna be doing, so y'all got the contentions I sent you. So first we're gonna have each person is going to like, obviously there's one contention on the af and one contention on the neg. Each person is gonna read their contention. That's gonna be like constructive. And then each person is going to refute the other person's contentions.
No, you're
And
not
then
gonna refute. You're gonna play between.
yeah, it's kind of, but you can still like refute it while weighing, right? So each person is gonna like, it's kind of like what me and Daniel showed last week. So let's say you have, let's say they have like an innovation, and then you have a accessibility contention. You'd be like, oh, they talk about innovation, but the probability of that happening is so low because it's so hard to create a drug, whereas you know that the drugs already on the market are like going, they already work, but they just need to be affordable. So the probability of me saving lives as opposed to my opponent saving lives is a lot higher, right? So you're gonna like kind of weigh while refuting their case. So
Compare.
yeah. So compare the cases and explain why yours is more important, yours makes more sense, and why theirs is bad, right? So first, both people will read their cases, then both people will kind of refute and weigh against each other's cases, and then we're gonna have one last speech at the end to kind of like sum up everything for both sides.
Okay.
So does anyone not understand their contention? All right, then I'm gonna ask Siri to flip a coin. So somebody, William or Daniel, pick heads or tails.
Heads.
Heads. All right. Hey Siri, flip a coin. Oh my God, Siri didn't understand. Hey Siri, flip a coin.
It's tails.
It's tails. All right, Daniel, would you like to go first or second?
Second.
All right. Well, William, let's hear your speech. So just read off of the contention I just sent you just now. And everyone, make sure you're flowing this. So please get out like a sheet of paper and a pen, including the people who are debating, so you can know each other's arguments.
I have to flow my own argument.
William, no, you don't have to flow your own because obviously that's kind of hard. But you should be flowing Daniel's when he makes them.
Okay. Contention 2 is private sector isn't going to make pharmaceuticals affordable. The prices of drugs have been rising for the last couple of decades. The producers of these drugs continuously claim that they're working on lowering drug prices. Pharma giant Merck recently pledged to avoid increasing prices of some drugs and even to lower the prices of others. We believe these moderate increases are a responsible approach which will help to contain costs. The CEO said that at the annual shareholders meeting, the assurance wasn't made last week when Pfizer, Novartis, Sanofi, and Roche of multiple drug companies offered similar pledges and amid smaller criticism. It was nearly 3 decades ago in 1990 when the CEO, Roy Vagelos, tried to claim political fury over high prescription costs. According to analysts who have watched the uncontainable resin drug costs over the past few decades, these promises are far from new, and the pharmaceutical industry's promises to contain drug prices are a familiar and fleeting phenomenon. As been proved by history, price restraint vows only last as long as it is politically necessary for companies to make them. Recent pledges are unlikely to be any different. Paul Ginsberg, a director of the Shafir Initiative of Health Policy, says that these things are only going up in the past decade. A 12-week Hep C treatment costs upwards of $95K, 38% more than the average income of an American family. If the 3.5 million people have had Hep C in the United States can't afford the treatment that they need, what's the point of having one at all? Not only will the consumers be unable to get the help they need, the producers are unable to turn a profit. Okay.
Alright.
And thus we affirm. Thank you.
Yes. So if anyone missed what William was saying, he basically was saying that, these drug companies are hiking up prices a lot for no reason. And they're always like, oh, we promise to lower them. And they lower them for like a couple of weeks. But in the long term, they always go up. And they're really expensive, which is why a lot of people aren't able to afford them. And that's why a lot of people in America can't afford their drug treatments. Like 3.5 million people in America that have hepatitis C. A lot of them probably have difficulty affording their treatments. So that's why we should get price controls to make these drugs more affordable for the average person. All right, Daniel, take it away with your speech.
All right. Could I start?
Oh, wait, 1 second before that. I just want to remind everyone too that I know William, you did a pretty good job for reading it your first time reading this. You didn't write this yourself, and you probably obviously had no idea what it was what was going to be the next word. But I would advise everyone that even if you don't know how to pronounce a name, right? I saw, I could kind of tell that William was struggling with Schaffer and a couple other names. You just mispronounce it and act like it's the right way to say it, right? Just be really confident when you're reading your case, even if you don't know what you're saying. Just say it in a confident way, and then all the judges will love you anyways. So yeah. With that, go ahead, Daniel, whenever you're ready.
All right. Price controls would lead to the production of less drugs. The FDA has recently reported several drug shortages, and this isn't a new problem. It's a problem that has persisted for many years. Back in 2012, there was a lot of controversy regarding drug shortages, especially for two critical cancer drugs. Methotrexate, a drug for treating the most common form of leukemia, and Doxil, a drug used to treat ovarian cancer and AIDS related to sarcoma, experienced drug shortages. According to Wall Street Journal, the shortage occurred when Benview, one of the 4 domestic suppliers, closed its plants because it could no longer guarantee product safety. And the reason as to why they couldn't guarantee product safety, lack of funding. Due to lack of funding, companies were unable to employ as many people, and without as many people, they couldn't produce the same number of high-quality drugs. To meet up with demand, they had to work overtime, and because they were working so much more, the quality wasn't as high as it was before, and so less drugs were meeting the quality requirement of the FDA, which ultimately means the less drugs were on the market. Unfortunately, drug shortages aren't a rare and new phenomenon. They've been around as long as drugs themselves have. The number of drug shortages have been going up exponentially. In 2004, there were 58 reported drug shortages, but in 2012 there were 267, and in just the first half year of 2018, there were 194 reported drug shortages. Even the number of generic drugs have been decreasing, largely due to the amount of drug suppliers declining. In 1967, there were 26 vaccine suppliers, but now there are only 6. Supply disruptions are becoming increasingly common due to both the lower quality of drugs, the rising number of safety problems, and because the pharmaceutical industry has failed to invest in the quality control technology that would help minimize the problem. This is largely due to the already tight budget of generic drug production in the U.S. Lower prices force drug makers to leave various markets because they're losing money. They also lower the chance that a manufacturer will invest towards better manufacturing technologies and processes, as shown by a 2009 study conducted by Journal of Management Science. According to that same study, government price controls on a generic drug limits a manufacturer's margin to 6%. The pharmaceutical industry is already stretched so thin. If we impose price control, both the government and the pharmaceutical industry are going to lose money. Not only that, but there won't even be drugs to help people. It's more effective and more beneficial to have drugs at a regular price to help some people than to have no drugs at a discounted one that would help no one.
All right, great job from Daniel. So if anyone was confused about Daniel's contention, basically it was just that price controls would lead to less production of drugs. And basically there's a lot of drug shortages right now, and a lot of these drug manufacturers, they're running out of money because, they just don't they aren't the ones selling the drugs at a high price. It's like the drug companies themselves, the distributors, not actually the drug manufacturers. So these drug manufacturers aren't earning a lot of money. So a lot of them either shut down, or they have to fire people, or they're cutting corners when they're making their drugs, which leads to low quality drugs. So if we were to implement price controls, more manufacturers would go out of business, and we'd probably also have worse quality drugs and more drug shortages in general. Okay, so now that we've heard both sides, why don't I give Daniel and William, y'all have 1 minute to prepare a speech against each other's contentions. Yeah. Just weigh your own and explain why it's more important than your opponent's. All right, so that was a minute. So William, let's hear your speech, basically weighing your contention, explaining why it's more important as compared to Daniel's.
Okay, it isn't that good, but okay, whatever. So in my case, because the prices of the drugs keep on going up, if we don't have a price control on drugs on the pharmaceutical industry, then that means that maybe like 0 point, like very little people will be able to buy the drugs, and like everyone else will not be able to afford the drugs, like meaning death. And in my opponent's case, uh, uh, still many people can get the drug. It's just that some people, it's not that effective. Like if the price was it's still partially effective, and still everyone can get it, which is better than it being 100% effective and only like 0.1% of the population being able to afford the drugs, which I think is more important. That's kind of all I had.
Yeah, good job. I just recommend that you were kind of like, the way I see it, your speech was kind of going on scope and severity, right? You're basically saying if people can't afford the drugs, they'll either die. And there's a lot more people who can't afford it than the people who can currently afford it, even with drug shortages. And you basically make the trade-off that like, okay, sure, there might be worse quality drugs, but at least people won't die that way because then everyone can afford it. Whereas before there was only a small number of people getting saved by these drugs.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it was kind of a scope and severity argument. So Daniel, let's hear yours against Williams.
I'm not ready yet.
All right, let's give you a minute to prepare, and then we'll hear yours after a minute. All right, that's been a minute for Daniel. So can we hear your speech against Williams?
Yeah, mine isn't good either, but
It's okay.
So I'm just pharmaceutical price controls would be a bigger problem than having less profit, because due to the fact that that people are creating less, the fact that people with this would create less effective drugs and have less workers and less efficient methods, even if that would mean they would not turn a profit or would have a small margin of profit. It's still very, the difference between having a way to diagnose a problem with one's body is outweighs the problems with profit margins and yeah, I guess.
All right, great. So I think you did a pretty good job of like comparing the arguments and kind of re-summarizing them. But I think what would have been kind of good is if you could, explain why. Like you said, profit margins are more important than these price controls, like than accessibility, right? And I think you would probably have to explain why that is more important. One thing could be like it's a prerequisite. If we don't have drugs, then like if we don't have drug manufacturers, then even if people can't afford them, like where would they buy the drugs, right? So that's another question to consider. All right, so I don't think we'll have time for both of you to give another speech. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna Daniel, were you flowing? Daniel Baumberger, were you flowing these?
Yeah, but not in like a legible way.
That's fine, just for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm gonna weigh Williams' contention against Daniel's contention, and Daniel, you're gonna weigh it against Williams, okay?
Like me, Daniel?
Yeah, you, Daniel.
Oh, sure.
Just to like give an example of how we would want it to be done. So let's see. Williams is about accessibility, right? Okay. So for so many years, there have been arguments about, oh, the companies need profits. The companies need profits. And that's why we've been putting off decreasing drug prices that are literally killing thousands of people and making them unaffordable for millions of people. I would say my argument prereqs my opponents because although drug manufacturers are important, as long as they're not going out of business, it doesn't really matter, right? In their case, they talk about how it would limit the manufacturer's profit margins to 6% if we were to implement price controls. But that just goes to show that they wouldn't go out of business. There would probably just be less drugs produced. But I would say it's a lot more important right now for more people to be able to afford these drugs than for like a greater number of drugs to be produced and put onto the market even when no one is able to afford them. So accessibility is a prerequisite to the manufacturing of the drug because people need to be able to afford it first before we can consider like how many drugs we need to be able to put on the market. And then the second thing is also probability because 100% sure that when you decrease these prices, millions more Americans will be able to afford these drugs. Like you just know that empirically that's the way it works. But we have no idea like if these generic manufacturers or these drug manufacturers are lying about their profits, or you don't know the actual impact of price controls on their profit margins, since if they can sell to more people now, they might be able to make more money. So overall, in terms of probability and also in terms of a prereq, we're the ones winning the round today.
Okay, wait. Is it my turn? All right, let's go. Judge, the first reason you're going to be looking to our impact first is on reversibility. Our impact is not reversible. When we have these price controls implemented, these companies literally close permanently. That means that they're not going to have these innovations, and it's not going to be reversible in the same way that access to drugs is reversible. We can always supplement access to drugs with other programs and find ways to get people out of poverty so that they can access these drugs, but we're not going to be able to bring these dead companies back so that they can innovate more. And innovation is a key internal link. It's a prerequisite to having these people access drugs in the first place, because if we're not innovating and making new drugs, there's going to be no drugs to buy and no reason for people to buy drugs. And it also solves for their impact, because when we do things that are better for these companies, it allows trickle-down economics to work, and it gets people jobs. People's jobs are going to have increased wages, which means that they're going to be able to do things like afford more drugs in the future. Their only argument against ours is that there's no empirical data behind our argument, and there's empirical data behind their argument, but there isn't any empirical data behind their argument. They haven't seen the effects of price controls in the past, and we don't know whether it's going to actually lead to these drugs becoming more accessible, especially if these companies are going bankrupt and have to jack up prices in order for them to survive and stay afloat in the first place and kill innovation. We see these effects happening, and there is empirical proof that when these companies' profit margins are lowering, it's going to lead to these impacts. And we have empirical data and actual concrete data about like how these companies' profit margins work, because they pay taxes, they submit tax returns, etc. So they're going to have this, the government's going to have this data when they're implementing these solutions, and we're going to have access to this data in order to make determinations about whether they can that they cannot survive these price controls.
Yeah, go Daniel. Okay, and if anyone wonders what like empirical means, it just means like historical. So an
Oh, yeah.
empiric is like something historical. So by talking about empirics, Daniel was kind of weighing about like probability. So like, since it's already happened in the past, you can probably predict it's more likely to happen. His argument is probably more likely than something that doesn't have empirics like mine.
Yeah,
But
like-
yeah, that was just an example. So next week we are going to see John Gunn and Ethan debate. And then Juliana, I will also DM you a contention. I feel like John Gunn might just like, I don't know, he already disappeared, but he might just say like no to it tomorrow. But if worst comes to worst, me or Daniel, we can always go against you as well. Don't worry. We'll go easy. So
Wait, so what am I supposed to do?
I'm just going
We're
to
just doing
send
weighing
you.
drills.
I'm gonna DM you a contention on Teams, and all you need to do is read over it and like understand what the contention is saying before next week. That sound good?
Okay.
All right. So
Yeah. Won't I have to read it out next week anyways though?